The Galactic Fleet's Admiral Kal Varro stood at the viewport of his flagship, the Zephyros, gazing at the rapidly diminishing human vessels on the periphery of his scanners. He crossed his forearms behind his back, a satisfied smirk creeping across his angular face. His violet skin shimmered under the soft glow of the bridge lights, and his elongated head tilted slightly, basking in what he considered inevitable victory. The humans were retreating just as he had predicted. Their so-called Earth fleet was nothing more than a ragtag assembly of outdated ships, piloted by a species barely evolved enough to grasp the concept of interstellar war. "Admiral, the humans are disengaging," reported First Officer Nael, his voice clipped and efficient as always. Varro's smirk deepened. Of course they are. They've finally realized they're outmatched. He turned to the assembled officers on the bridge, their violet eyes gleaming with confidence. The Falthani people were the dominant species in this quadrant of the galaxy, having subjugated dozens of worlds with superior tactics, advanced technology, and centuries of military discipline. To them, this battle was just another skirmish in a long campaign of conquest. "Maintain course," Varro ordered. "We'll pursue the humans and wipe out what's left of their fleet. This war will be over before the solar cycle turns." The officers nodded in agreement, and the Zephyros's engines roared to life, pushing the massive warship forward. The rest of the fleet, an impressive collection of destroyers, cruisers, and support vessels, moved in unison, closing the distance to the fleeing humans. But Admiral Varro had underestimated one crucial factor: the humans were far from beaten. Captain Sarah Kincaid stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Endeavour, staring intently at the tactical display. Red blips, representing the Falthani fleet, crept closer and closer to her retreating forces. Her short, dark hair framed a face etched with determination. She tapped her fingers on the armrest of her command chair, calculating, waiting. They had to believe she was pulling back, had to believe she was scared. But fear wasn't part of the plan. "How long until the Falthani fleet is fully within the kill zone?" she asked in a low, focused voice. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Zhao, her tactical officer, quickly scanned the readings. 5 minutes, maybe less. They're closing fast. Kincaid nodded. Perfect. The bridge of the Endeavour was a stark contrast to the grandeur of the Falthani flagship. It was utilitarian, built for function over form, with dimly lit consoles and exposed wiring, showing the wear of countless battles. But her crew was sharp, their loyalty unwavering. They knew the stakes. "Signal the Valiant and the Starfire to hold position," Kincaid ordered, "and have the Resolute stand by to launch her drones the moment we're in range." Zhao tapped a few keys on his console, relaying the orders. "Done." Kincaid leaned forward, her eyes never leaving the tactical screen. It was a simple plan, really, but the Falthani wouldn't see it coming. They were too used to winning, too used to their enemies falling apart when faced with overwhelming force. But humanity had learned from defeat. They had studied every battle, every mistake, and now they had turned retreat into a weapon. As the enemy fleet drew closer, Kincaid's heart raced, but outwardly she remained calm, cold even. This was the moment. This was the moment. This was where they would turn the tide. "Admiral, the humans are slowing down," Nael reported, a flicker of uncertainty creeping into his voice. Varro frowned, glancing at the sensor data. True enough, the human ships were no longer accelerating away. They seemed to be drifting, almost waiting for his fleet to catch up. "They must be experiencing engine failure," Varro muttered, "or perhaps their cowardice has frozen them in place." Nael hesitated. "It's possible, Admiral." Varro dismissed the doubt with a wave of his hand. "Either way, they're finished. Order the fleet to close to bombardment range. Prepare to fire all weapons." The Falthani warships surged forward, eager to deal the killing blow. Plasma cannons charged, missile tubes locked onto targets, and energy shields shimmered into full strength. This was the moment Varro had been waiting for: the annihilation of the human resistance. But something strange happened. As the Falthani fleet crossed the invisible line between pursuit and engagement, the humans didn't fire back. They didn't even maneuver defensively. Instead, their ships remained eerily still. A chill ran down Nail's spine. "Admiral, something isn't right. Why aren't they responding?" Before Varro could reply, the lights on the bridge flickered, and a deep hum resonated through the hull. Suddenly, the tactical display filled with dozens of new contacts, small, fast-moving objects that were closing on the Falthani fleet from all directions. "Drones," Varro hissed, realization dawning too late. The humans had lured them into a trap. The drones, launched from the Resolute moments earlier, swarmed the Falthani ships with surgical precision. Each one carried a high-yield electromagnetic pulse EMP warhead, designed to disable shields, weapons, and engines. The first wave struck without warning, detonating in brilliant bursts of energy that sent shock waves rippling through space. The Zephyros shuddered violently as its shields collapsed, and consoles across the bridge sparked and went dark. "Admiral, we've lost shields," Nail shouted, his voice panicked. "Weapons are offline and engines are barely functioning." Varro slammed his fist on the nearest console, fury boiling in his chest. How could they? Before he could finish, a second wave of drones hit, targeting the Falthani cruisers and destroyers. One by one, the mighty warships were crippled, left adrift and vulnerable. The humans had exploited the Falthani's arrogance, drawing them in close before springing the trap. And it was only just beginning. On the Endeavor, Kincaid allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The drones had done their job. The Falthani fleet was in disarray, their systems freed, their ships helpless. Now it was time to press the advantage. "Zhao, bring the Endeavor about," she ordered. "All ships, attack formation Delta. Let's finish this." The Endeavor turned on a sharp axis, its engines roaring to full power as it surged toward the crippled Falthani fleet. The human ships, once thought to be in retreat, now bore down on their enemies with ruthless efficiency. Railguns fired, missile salvos screamed through the void, and laser batteries unleashed searing beams of energy. The Falthani were caught completely off guard. Without shields or weapons, they could do little but watch as their once proud fleet was torn apart. The Endeavor's railguns punched clean through the hull of a Falthani destroyer, ripping it in half with a thunderous explosion. To the right, the Valiant launched a spread of torpedoes that crippled another cruiser, sending it spiraling into a debris field. Ship by ship, the Falthani forces were being annihilated. Kincaid watched it all unfold, her mind calm and calculating. This was what she had been waiting for, the moment the Falthani would realize they had underestimated humanity. The moment they would taste defeat. Captain Zhao called out, his voice tight with excitement. "We're receiving a distress signal from the Falthani flagship. They're requesting terms for surrender." For a brief moment, Kincaid considered it. Ending the war here, now, with a clean victory. But then she remembered the colonies they had burned, the civilians they had slaughtered. No, there would be no mercy today. "Tell them we're not interested," she said coldly. "Continue the assault." Zhao relayed the message, and moments later, the Endeavor's railguns fired again, striking the Zephyros' damaged hull. The massive flagship shuddered under the impact, and on the bridge, Admiral Varro stumbled, catching himself on a console as alarms blared around him. "Admiral, we can't take much more of this," Nail shouted, frantically trying to bring the ship's systems back online. Varro's face twisted in rage and disbelief. How had this happened? How had a species as primitive as the humans outsmarted him? He had never lost a battle before, never even entertained the possibility of defeat. And yet here he was, his fleet in ruins, his flagship on the verge of destruction. He turned to Nael, his voice hoarse with fury. "Order a full retreat. We'll regroup and..." Before he could finish, the Zephyros was rocked by another explosion, this one far more powerful than the last. The lights flickered and died, and the viewports shattered inward as the atmosphere vented into space. Varro was thrown to the deck, gasping for air as the cold void claimed him. On the Endeavor, the crew watched as the Zephyros erupted into a brilliant fireball, the once mighty Falthani flagship reduced to nothing but a cloud of debris. Kincaid stood in silence for a moment, letting the victory sink in. The battle was over. The trap had worked. The Falthani fleet, which had once seemed invincible, now lay shattered in the cold depths of space. "Send a message to Earth Command," Kincaid said finally, her voice steady. "Tell them the Falthani threat has been neutralized." Zhao nodded and quickly set to work, but Kincaid's mind was already elsewhere. The Falthani had underestimated humanity, and they had paid the price for their arrogance. But this war wasn't over. Not yet. There were still other threats out there, other enemies, who would seek to test humanity's resolve. But Kincaid knew, as she gazed out at the wreckage of the Falthani fleet, that humanity would be ready. They always were. As the wreckage of the Falthani fleet drifted lifelessly in the void, Captain Sarah Kincaid allowed herself a rare moment of silence on the bridge. The battle was won. The tension that had gripped her crew for hours was starting to dissipate, though the flickers of adrenaline and disbelief still rippled through the room. They had done what seemed impossible. They had beaten the Falthani, not with superior firepower, but with intelligence and precision. All enemy contacts neutralized, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Zhao reported, though his tone was more subdued than celebratory. Kincaid didn't blame him. Despite the victory, the cost of this war had been high. She could almost hear the ghosts of the colonists whose lives had been taken by the Falthani's brutal campaign echoing in her mind. But there was no time to dwell on those losses now. There was work to do, even in victory. "Status on our remaining forces?" Kincaid asked, stepping down from her command chair and crossing the bridge toward the tactical display. Zhao ran his hand over the console. "We've lost 2 cruisers and several smaller support ships. Casualty estimates still coming in, but it looks like over 100 dead, another 50 injured across the fleet." Kincaid inhaled sharply but nodded. It could have been far worse. Deploy rescue teams to recover survivors from the wreckage. Priority on the ships closest to us. "Aye," Captain Zhao replied, relaying the orders swiftly. The screen now showed the scattered remnants of the Falthani vessels, nothing more than twisted metal and plumes of fire. Kincaid's gaze swept over the debris field, her mind turning to what lay ahead. They had crippled the Falthani fleet in this sector, but that didn't mean the entire empire was finished. The Falthani were proud, deeply entrenched in their superiority complex. There would be retaliation. Somewhere, a new admiral would rise to take Varro's place. "Captain," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Commander Elise Walker, her second in command, approaching with the familiar clipped efficiency that always reminded Kincaid why she trusted her. Walker's expression was somber. "We've just received an encrypted message from Earth Command. You'll want to read this." Kincaid took the datapad from Walker's hands, a faint sense of foreboding gnawing at her as she scanned the screen. The message was brief but heavy with implications. "Urgent, all fleet commanders. New intelligence on Falthani reinforcements, immediate response required. Despite your recent victories, reconnaissance suggests that the Falthani Empire is rallying. A second, larger fleet is en route to your location. Their numbers far exceed our current projections. Earth Command is sending reinforcements, but they will not arrive in time. You are authorized to act as necessary to secure this system. Prepare for a possible worst-case scenario. Kincaid's chest tightened as she read the last lines. "A second fleet," she muttered under her breath. Of course, the Falthani wouldn't let this defeat go unanswered. Her eyes flicked to Walker, who had clearly read the message too. "How long do we have?" Walker asked quietly. "Not long enough," Kincaid replied, setting the datapad aside. She stared out at the stars for a moment, calculating their options. The fleet had taken damage in the last engagement. They were in no shape for another battle of this scale. Reinforcements wouldn't be here in time. They were on their own again. She turned, stepping back up to the center of the bridge. "Open a fleet-wide channel." Zhao tapped the controls, and a brief chime confirmed the channel was live. "This is Captain Kincaid to all ships. I know many of you thought the battle was over, that the war might be coming to an end after our victory today. But new intelligence has just come in. The Falthani are sending another fleet, one far larger than the one we just destroyed. We don't have an exact ETA, but it won't be long before they're here." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The tension on the bridge had returned, palpable and heavy. "I won't lie to you, this will be the hardest fight yet. But I know this crew. I know what you've done today, what you're capable of. We've beaten the odds before. We can do it again. Get your ships ready. I'll have a plan soon." The channel closed, and Kincaid looked to Walker, who met her gaze with the same unflinching resolve. "We need to buy time," Kincaid said. "If we can stall the Falthani long enough, reinforcements from Earth might arrive before we're overwhelmed. But if we meet them head-on, we'll be wiped out." "Suggestions?" Walker asked, folding her arms, thinking along the same lines. Kincaid pulled up the star chart on the main tactical display. "There's a dense asteroid field 3 light minutes from here, near the planet's outer belt. It's too dangerous to navigate for larger ships, but we could use it to our advantage. We could lure them in, make it look like we're trying to hide or make repairs. Once they enter the field, we ambush them." Walker's eyebrows rose. "We'd be fighting on their terms again, but this time in an even more confined space. There's no guarantee they'd fall for it." "Maybe," Kincaid said, her mind working through the layers of the plan. "But if we hit them with a surprise like last time, another tactic they won't expect, we might just even the odds. We still have some of those EMP drones left. Enough to disable part of their vanguard before they realize what's happening." Zhao interjected. "We're talking about a fleet 3 times the size of the one we just defeated. It won't be easy, Captain." Kincaid nodded. "No, it won't. But we don't need to destroy the entire fleet. We just need to hold them off long enough for our reinforcements to arrive. We lure them in, hit them hard, and then pull back deeper into the asteroid field. We use the terrain, make them chase us, force them into a position where their numbers won't matter." Walker crossed her arms, considering. "And when Earth Command arrives, we turn the tables." Kincaid smiled faintly. "Exactly." Walker nodded. "I'll start the preparations. We'll need all ships ready to move within the hour." As Walker left the bridge to oversee the preparations, Kincaid lingered by the tactical display, her eyes tracing the paths of the enemy fleet that would soon descend upon them. The plan was risky, no doubt about it. But they had no choice. It was either fight smart or be crushed by sheer numbers. Hours later, the human fleet drifted silently among the asteroids, the massive chunks of rock and ice providing cover as they lay in wait. Kincaid stood at the center of the Endeavor's bridge, the tension even greater now than it had been during the last battle. They had only one chance to execute this ambush perfectly. "Any sign of them?" Kincaid asked, her voice tight. Zhao shook his head, eyes glued to the sensor readings. "Not yet, but they're coming." Moments ticked by, each one stretching longer than the last. Then, without warning, Zhao's console beeped urgently. "Contact," he said, voice grim. "They're here." Kincaid moved to his side, watching as the Falthani fleet appeared on the edge of the sensor range. Just as the intelligence had warned, there were far more ships this time, an overwhelming wall of red blips advancing steadily toward the human positions. The Falthani ships were scanning the field, searching for any sign of the retreating humans, but Kincaid had ensured that the fleet maintained strict radio silence. The enemy would have to enter the field and search for them visually, just as planned. "Wait until they're fully inside the field," Kincaid ordered quietly, every muscle in her body tense with anticipation. The seconds stretched into minutes as the Falthani fleet entered the asteroid field, their movements slow and cautious. It was clear they suspected a trap, but they had no choice but to push forward. They were here to finish the job. "Hold," Kincaid whispered, her eyes narrowing as she watched the lead Falthani ships close in on their position. The tension on the bridge was suffocating. Every breath was held, every second a countdown to the moment when they would spring the ambush. Now Kincaid ordered. The human fleet erupted from the shadows of the asteroids, every ship firing simultaneously. The EMP drones shot forward in a coordinated wave, detonating in blinding bursts that sent shockwaves rippling through the Falthani vanguard. Dozens of enemy ships were disabled in an instant, their systems fried and their shields down. "Fire all weapons," Kincaid commanded, and the Endeavor's railguns thundered to life, unleashing a torrent of destruction upon the Falthani ships. Explosions lit up the asteroid field as human warships tore into the enemy fleet. The Falthani, caught completely off guard, scrambled to regroup, but the confined space of the asteroid field worked against them. Their larger ships struggled to maneuver, while the smaller human vessels darted between the rocks, striking with deadly precision. Kincaid's plan was working. The Falthani were being funneled into a narrow kill zone, their superior numbers meaningless in the chaos of the asteroid field. But even as the human fleet gained the upper hand, Kincaid knew it was only a matter of time before the Falthani reinforcements would arrive and overwhelm them. Status on the reinforcements from Earth, Kincaid asked urgently. Zhao checked his console, his face pale. Still 15 minutes out. Kincaid clenched her fists. 15 minutes. They just had to hold out for 15 minutes. Keep hitting them, she ordered. We can't let them regroup. The battle raged on, the human fleet fighting with every ounce of strength they had left. The asteroids around them were shattered by stray fire, creating fields of debris that made navigation even more treacherous. But Kincaid's forces pressed on, refusing to back down. Just when it seemed like they couldn't hold out any longer, Zhao's console beeped with a new signal. Captain, I'm picking up Earth Fleet signatures, Zhao shouted, a surge of hope in his voice. Kincaid's heart leapt as she saw the friendly blips appear on the tactical display. Earth's reinforcements had arrived. The remaining Falthani ships, sensing the arrival of the new fleet, began to pull back, their disciplined retreat an acknowledgement of defeat. They couldn't win this fight now, not with Earth's combined fleet bearing down on them. Kincaid stood tall, watching as the Falthani ships jumped to warp, vanishing into the darkness of space. The battle was over. A deep sense of relief washed over her. They had won again. But this time the victory was final. The Falthani Empire had thrown everything they had at humanity, and it hadn't been enough. She turned to her crew, a proud smile on her face. We did it. The bridge erupted in cheers, but Kincaid remained calm. This victory belonged to all of them. They had proven, once and for all, that humanity was not to be underestimated. And now, the galaxy knew it too.